Welcome to Trial by Wine. We take a closer look at crimes that highlight how fascinating humans can be. Schmitty, Swanee and Clarkey visit crimes and run them through their jury of three, debating both sides of the case to agree an appropriate, if totally fictitious, sentence. Please be advised, Trial by Wine may include explicit or disturbing content and will include drunken rambling. Listener discretion is advised. All right, how are we?
Fabulous.
Great.
That was really believable too, Swanee.
Fabulous.
We're just getting ourselves into position because we have, frankly, the most awkward technical setup. But, you know, that's what happens when you sit in the same room and share a mic and have two laptops and notepads and whatever going. And I'm trying to get us both audible.
If you do want to complain about the fact I'm not facing the microphone enough,
It's not even facing the microphone. It's
please
close enough
email
to it.
Schmitty.
Yeah. If it annoys you as much as it annoys me that Clark yours sounds like he's miles away, it's because he has an aversion to the microphone, I think. I kept in the last recording, I kept pushing the mic closer and closer to him, and he kept moving further and further back, and I'm like,
He's scared of the BBC.
Swanee,
he
if you,
doesn't like
if
the
you
BBC.
wonder where Stuart's gone, he's been kicked away.
Oh, I can see his hand.
You could move
By
over, or
Schmitty's
you could sit
side
behind you
and
in a
have
sort of
everything.
strange...
I could only see him come interview when he would laugh and lean forward last episode
sit
anyway.
over
Well,
here.
there's
Because
no
I can only
more.
see like that bit.
You could sit here and she'd see him on mine.
Oh, sit on a lap.
Yeah, it's a bit like that, though.
Like a ventriloquist.
It's very intimate in this recording space.
Don't you have a studio on the houseboat?
No, I haven't got around to building one yet. No, you're right. It's
There
something
you
I
go.
need to focus on. Yeah.
And I'm the problem.
Houseboat with recording studio.
Yeah, I do. I need to sort that shit out. I suppose we should introduce ourselves. I'm Schmitty.
I'm yawning, sorry.
We
Bad timing. I was sort of like, I'm Swanee.
And I'm Clarkey. And together we are
Trial by
Wine.
And what are we drinking?
Wine.
We are drinking wine.
That is what we're drinking.
Oh, well done.
Yeah, we're on the rose again. It's the Aldi special from the Loire Valley Dale.
All right, nice,
Yeah.
nice.
$9.99 in good Aldi supermarkets everywhere. You'll find it in the alcohol section.
Yeah, and it's quite nice. It's quite drinkable. Yes.
But giving this a bit of acid.
A little bit of acid. but what-
Rose now celebrating a black out.
Yeah, I don't think that it's specifically this rosé. I think it's any rosé, any white wine does this to me, especially after a big night the night before. And what about you, Swanee? What are you drinking?
Oh, I've gone top shelf and I've got a glass of Schweppes sparkling water, whereas
need to
normally
calm
I would
down,
have
honey.
home brand. And I thought this is a little bit special, a little bit of Schweppevescence.
Schweppevescence for
I
your
know.
day.
Must have been on sale. So I'm going for a little bit of Schweppes. So
You are living the high life.
My kids call Trial by Wine, Trial by Sparkling Water for me anyway.
Do you know there's a cost of living crisis going on and you are drinking Schweppevescence,
look at
not
me.
home brand?
I know normally it's
You're
like
so
I've got like
insulated.
Coles or Woolies or whatever is home brand. I was like, I'll crack open a bottle
Hey.
of Schweppes.
Paid $2.
So
I'm
do I.
going to treat myself. $2 for this whole 1.25 litre.
Yeah.
It's a Saturday.
Oh, I'm just showing off.
All right. So, would you like to hear a story?
Love to.
Please.
Okay. Clarky's looking forward to this one. This is
So looking forward
this
to
is
it.
one that we've sort of.
When we were drinking last night, Schmitty gave away
Like
what the
this.
story was, and I'm
Oh.
excited.
Yeah, so I'm sure you would have heard about this one, Swanee. And if you haven't,
Yeah.
it just goes to show how arrogant we are in Victoria that we think, you know, our news is
We-
newsworthy.
Oh, it's
We
a
were
Victorian
talking
story, is it?
about it once before. It is a Victorian story.
Yeah.
We
I don't
have
reckon I would have
spoken
heard it.
about it, not in a lot of detail, but we're talking about one aspect of it.
No, you and I were. She was overseas.
Oh, is that
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Oh,
You don't
sorry, Jar.
know. Yeah, so no, you weren't
Oh,
here.
I'm
So
intrigued.
you may or may not know about it. Okay, so this case went to court a few months ago and it had a bit of a weird outcome, which sparked more discussion. So I thought I'd have a go at telling the
Lost.
story, yeah, and making sense of what happened and why the verdict seemed so odd.
Right.
And for once, I know very well that you, Clarkey, will be all over this one. My sources are theguardian.com, theage.com, probably .au, dailymail.co.uk, 60 Minutes, berwickstarcommunity.com.au.
I think you'll find it's Berwick.
It's Berwick. Pedestrian TV, abcnews.com.au, and 7 News Australia, and probably a bunch of others, but they were all so much the same story. So here we go. Russell and Robin Hill met in the 1960s and married in 1969. I estimate Russell was probably 25 at the time that he married
Robin.
Robin, thank you. So they moved into a flat in Lilydale when they were first married, but Russell's work as a logger had them moving around a bit. They had their first daughter, Debbie, in 1970, then Colleen in 1973, and Jenny in 1977.
That's no
Pretty
sons.
names.
No sons, no.
Pretty names.
Pretty names.
Eventually, they settled in Druin down in Gippy. Russell was an outdoorsy sort of guy, and the family would go on caravan holidays in the Christmas break. At some point in Russell's early years and before he met Robin, he had met Carol. Carol was a year younger than Russell, and they'd been in a relationship.
Carol was a hornbag.
But apparently Russell...
Are these people?
Mhm.
Oh, right. Okay. Yeah.
Apparently Russell had commitment issues, so they broke up. Carol married someone else, and Russell married Robin, which is sort of weird given that he had commitment issues. Maybe she was pregnant. I don't know. They married in 1969. Debbie was born in 70. Carol was...
Colleen,
Yeah.
Jenny.
That's right. However, they ran into each other.
Swammy's been taking bitch pills with us effervescence.
Oh, no, it's one of those ones. What, when you, like aspirin, what's that called? When it dissolves.
That's
one
clear,
of
yeah.
Yeah, like
Asproclear.
Asproclear. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like bitch clear.
Carol and Russell ran into each other again, and the spark was still there.
Deirdre Chambers. What a
What a
coincidence.
Exactly that.
Russell introduced Carol to his wife as his cousin. So almost from the
Oh.
time that Robin and Russell married, Robin understood this Carol woman to be his first cousin. The Hills and the Clays would holiday together, and Robin did think it was a bit weird when Russell and Carol would go off on walks together, and she didn't miss the chemistry between them. Carol eventually divorced her husband as she figured that she and Russell would make it official, as he said he'd also get a divorce. But those commitment issues were still there, and he didn't get a divorce, explaining that his wife wasn't a well woman. According to Carol's daughter, though, in the end it suited Carol to have a man without all the encumbrances of marriage. It would appear Robin knew about the affair, and I have no doubt that it caused her pain and anguish over the course of her marriage. At some time in 2000 or around 2006, a neighbour confronted Russell about the affair, and he came clean to Robin, saying he would end it. However, he did not. So what we've learned about Russell is that he is not a man of his word. Perhaps he was just in love with two women at the same time and couldn't choose one over the other.
It's like Emily in Paris.
Is it?
Well, that's where they're sort of headed at the moment. Well, that's kind of what they indicate that Emily's in love with two people at once.
Oh,
She's-
right,
I
right,
don't
right.
know. It's just the promo, sorry.
I don't know. The last time I saw it was after she
Except it's Russell in where? Druin.
did Druin. Yeah.
It
It's
doesn't have Russell in Druid. It doesn't have the same ring as Emily in
no,
Paris.
it doesn't have the same ring, no. Anyway, he and Carol did keep up their affair, and one of the things they liked to do was go camping.
I bet they did.
On March 19, 2020, Russell Hill left his home in Druin and went to Pakenham, where he picked up Carol Clay.
With the intent of packing them up, though.
Was Robin still at home?
Yeah, Robin was at home. Yeah, Robin gave him some money, and she'd gone and bought him something like Underbergs or some drinks anyway.
And she said, off you fuck.
Yeah, well, I think I had a nice time, love. But you've got to remember at this point in time, I think Robin's 73 or something, and so is Russell. So they're an older couple at this point. And we are led to believe that she knew all about the other person in the
Oh, okay.
marriage. I think she does say later on that I know she has made the statement.
She's
that-
like the Princess Diana of Druin. There are 3 people in this marriage.
I know, I had the same.
Oh,
thought
Robin.
about that. But
Robin.
she's like, oh, Carol was her own woman. She's an intelligent woman. You know, I don't hold anything against her, kind of thing.
Does
So-
Carol look like Camilla Parker Bowles?
No, although she's blonde, but no. Other than that, I would say Carol's much better looking than Camilla Parker
I
Bowles.
mean, Camilla Parker Bowles does look like a horse.
I think she looks
Which-
good these days.
She's
Yeah, I
grown
haven't
into
seen
her
her
big
since
horsey face. Yeah.
Diana.
But Diana was very
Where have
attractive,
you
but,
been?
You know. Anyway.
I am so not a royalist.
Yeah, I was going to say.
My
ounce of interest in the royal family was squashed by Harry and Meghan.
Oh, that would have done it to most people, I imagine.
Yeah. Well, they're not royals anymore.
No.
Fuck them off. So Robin packs him up, gives him some cash, I think, and some food and some booze from memory, because he likes to sit around the campfire and have his drinks at night and chill out. And but he did tell his wife Robin that he was going camping alone. And he wasn't sure when they'd get back or when he'd get back.
Carol Clay. What a
Coincidence!
Oh,
Now, Russell did have a few hobbies other than camping and bonking Carol. One was using a CB radio to talk to mates every day, which reminded me of the radios we had on the houseboat in black and
Cool,
white.
Russell. Cool.
Yeah, that's of its day, isn't it? Like, so it is.
This is 2020 that he's
exactly.
he's still
it
into
had
it.
its day. That wasn't 2020.
I agree. Well, so the ones on the houseboat.
Break a breakout. What are those names like?
10-4
I'll
on the
have
ducky,
my
got
heart
ourselves a
Right, that's it,
car.
right.
Oh, good buddy.
Convoy.
Do you remember when we were at Foxtel, a car, and we both had seen Twister, and I took the CB
Yes.
radio, just the curly end and
do.
the end of it, and she'd pick it up and she'd go, 10-4, Schmitty, we got ourselves a Twister. And they would just do ridiculous play acting over
In the office,
in the
across the
office.
partition.
across the partitions, yes. It's
Hi,
very
Jinx.
amusing. Had to do something to make it fun. He also really got into flying drones after he retired, and he liked to fly them over the wilderness tracks that he'd worked on clearing in his heyday as a logger. And that was all around this sort of the high country, the Mansfield
It's
area.
odd that you spend your life killing or felling trees and then you like to fly your drone over it and film the wilderness that you've been destroying for most of your life.
I mean, there's plenty of wilderness that's not destroyed by a couple of tracks that go in. I think you're going a bit
I didn't
farther.
think of it like that. He's not
I
like
don't think a logger. He's
I
not
don't-
an
he wasn't-
environmental.
It wasn't logging your tracks. No, but the irony of
Like
cutting down all the
the
trees and
bush.
then going, oh, but I want to actually video the wilderness because
I don't know. I'm not sure. Maybe he just didn't think about it deeply. You know,
maybe just do anything for a buck. I'm not sure I like Russell yet. No,
I don't know much about Russell. I mean,
I'm not saying he deserves what happened. I'm
No, no.
saying I don't really like
I don't know much about him. His
what I've
his
heard.
kids
so-
liked him and they were very, emotional about him, and his mates liked him, but, to me,
Oh, they're
his wife,
likable. Well, how you
Robin
say?
liked him. She just,
Well, she must have.
she did 73. She's probably over it. She probably do want to have
They
sex.
probably had a little dealing anyway, and she went, oh, honey, no. Give it to Carol.
I read something about how at some point he was hospitalised, something to do with his penis. It had gotten hard and it wouldn't go down, and it was huge apparently. I don't know what relevance that had to anything and why it was in this
Stop it, you're
article.
turning me on.
I don't know what it was about.
All this talk of CBs and logging and hard-ons that won't go
It's all
down.
very
Oh, I
masculine.
think I'm going to
I
go
know.
camping.
Very
Russell in
masculine.
Druin. It's really got me going.
Well, let's start with Lilydale.
You're
Anyway,
on the wrong side of the country.
so Russell and Carol set up camp at Buck's Camp in Wanagata.
Wanagata Valley.
The serenity of their camp spot was to be disturbed, however.
How's the Serenity, Dale?
I know, right? Because there was actually another guy who'd been there a couple of days earlier. His name's Greg Lynn, and he was camping in the same place. And Greg had been there from the 18th of March, and he was a deer hunter, which is relatively
deer
common in the
hunter.
area.
What did he hunt?
Deer.
He was a deer hunter.
Such a deer. Now, he spent the 19th out chasing deer and was camping at Buck's Camp on that time when Russell and Carol arrived. It seems they spoke a bit, being Russell and Greg, as Russell told Greg about Russell's uncle, who'd been killed accidentally when part of a deer hunting party in 1994.
Oh,
And there was a plaque close by that read, "Not every stag under a tree is a deer."
Oh,
Very true.
oh.
So on the 20th of March, Greg went off to
Did
find a
his father
stag.
have this? Was it his father
Uncle.
or his uncle have the same erection problem?
Again, I
Not
can't-
every stag under a tree is a deer.
I have no idea what any of that was about. I just read it and thought, I haven't got time to worry about that. It doesn't sound right. Anyway.
but I'll just make note of his big hard cock and share it with them later.
So,
That will never go down.
it's like it was saying he had a big cock and it was...
Viagra or something.
Yeah, Viagra. That's what I was thinking.
It was just his
I was
horns.
going to say not
There's-
every rock hard cock is a natural phenomenon. I would imagine him at that age would be like
I think
Like,
it was earlier in his life.
plaque will read that. That's what his plaque will read.
I think his giant penis incident was earlier in his life.
Oh,
It wasn't then.
maybe
And
that's
then
why Robin hung around.
That's why it was confusing, because then there was talk about Viagra and stuff, and I'm like, what? When? I don't know. Anyway, I'm telling you, I feel it's all a bit irrelevant.
Okay.
So,
You mean, are you saying we've spent too much time on this already?
yeah, absolutely.
Right.
Yeah. So on the 20th of March,
That's funny. We're not going to talk about it for the whole entire episode.
Okay. Got it.
So on the 20th of March, Greg went off to find a stag of the deer variety, not a soon-to-be brew. His solitude was interrupted by what he said sounded like a swarm of bees. He realised that the noise was a drone hanging around overhead.
No, shoot that fuck.
Yeah, I'm not sure how you feel about drones, but I hate them with a passion. I find it intrusive and rude when one flies overhead, like I'm being spied on by some rando. There should be more done about them, I tell you. More done about them.
Particularly when Tony's got a huge erection that won't go down and it flies past the window.
Absolutely right.
Nothing to see here. Move along.
Totally inappropriate. Mind your own business. So when he got back to camp, he found out the drone belonged to Russell, who, and all of this is according to Greg, accused Greg of hunting too close to the camp and threatened to report him to the police. Greg dismissed this as the carry-on of a grumpy old fella and went back to his own camp. But because he was really mature, he stewed on it for a while and decided to play his music really loud from his blueness and patrol. According to court statements, Russell and Carol were in the tent, possibly getting jiggy with it, and Greg thought it would be a great idea to piss them off with the music. And
Russell's tent pole was holding the tent up. Do you know what he was listening to?
I don't, but I am going to hazard a guess at AC/DC.
Or Parkway Drive. It's that death metal stuff that I just...
This is horrible.
You know, it will get me angry.
Fantastic! You know, something horrible like that. Oh. Yeah, it's something broken. Let me be clear.
Was it Celine Dion?
I doubt it.
Clearly.
Near,
Far,
wherever you are. Anyway, not that, no. So according to Greg, Russell then went to Greg's car and took out Greg's 12-gauge shotgun and ammunition. He then started walking back to his camp and Greg followed him. Russell shot twice in the air and Greg took cover behind Russell's car, which was a white Land Rover, as he was terrified and get shot. So, being terrified of getting shot, the obvious thing to do is to then try and disarm the man with the gun, isn't it?
Take that mofo down.
Which he did. So he gets up to Russell, they're wrestling for the gun, and Greg distinctly remembered that his hands weren't on the trigger, but Russell's must have been as the gun went off. Oh yes, oh yes, oh yes, they both, oh yes, they both, oh yes, they both reached for the
Never
gun, the
misses
gun, the
an
gun, the gun,
opportunity
oh
to
yes,
slip
they
it
both
into the
reached for the gun, for
conversation.
the gun. So the gun goes off and a bullet goes through the passenger side wing mirror on Russell's car, killing Carol Clay instantly.
Oh.
It hits her in the head.
For this to have happened,
Yeah.
hitting her in the head, was for her. She would have had to have been cowering down next to the car because for the height of her next to the wing mirror, right?
And importantly, and I know you did say this, but I think it's worth just making sure everyone understands, this is his
This is all his
version of what
version.
happened.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
We'll
Because
find out in a moment why it's his version. So in the words of Ron Jeremy, that escalated quickly. Thank you, man.
although to your point, drones were involved, so did it?
I've done it again. It's Ron Burgundy.
I was going to say, Ron Jeremy's a porn star.
This is the third
Hang on a
time.
minute, how did that get in
Third
there?
time I've seen
I've been
Ron
sitting there
Jeremy
working that
and
through
Ron
my
Burgundy.
head going, Ron Jeremy's a porn star. Because when you said that escalated quickly and I thought, did he?
Speaking of huge,
Is he the one who had the...
stay hard for
went
it.
down? Yeah.
Yeah. So, of course, he let go of the gun and Russell ran to Carol. Greg then picks up the gun, fires the remaining rounds into the air to empty the gun, and then he puts the gun away safely in his car, which is exactly
In
what
the
he
heat of
do
the moment.
in that instance.
Yeah,
isn't
yeah,
it?
100%. That makes
Safety first. Well, let's not tend to someone who just got shot in the head
I'm a lover, not a fighter.
or
I
call
better
emergency
empty all of the
services,
rounds out of my
whether
gun.
it be 999 000 or 911.
Or Ron Jeremy.
Or Ron Jeremy. And I wrote Ron Jeremy. I remember
You wrote it. You wrote it.
Yeah.
Well played.
So then Russell, probably out of his mind with horror and grief, came toward, again, this is Greg's version of events, came toward him yelling, "She's dead," and tried to punch Greg whilst wielding a black-handled kitchen knife in his right hand. And I did find this detail interesting because let's assume that Russell is right-handed and his lover of 40-odd years has just been murdered, the love of his life, and he's got this knife in his right hand. According to Greg, Russell tried to punch him with his left hand. I
What's
find
because
that
he had the knife in the other hand? He
wouldn't
couldn't
you be
punch him.
stabbing at him, not punching him? You know, none of it makes sense. So in a struggle right out of a Hollywood action movie, they wrestled, and though Greg was pushed to the ground with Russell, the knife ended up in Russell's chest. Greg said, "I got up and stood back towards my car. He crawled a little and then just stopped and rolled over, and he died right there." Again, what's the first thing you'd do in this situation?
Cool on.
Well,
Scream.
I know a little bit too much to
They're your bias.
give a.
Dewey answered this. If you answered call 000, that's only one permutation or combination of response in this situation. And to be honest, I reckon panicking is probably what most people would do.
Yeah.
I mean, 2 people are dead, one from a gunshot wound from your own gun. You're the only witness and you're in the middle of nowhere. In Greg's words, I thought very quickly, what am I going to do? I panicked and I thought, that's my shotgun. There's one person dead and he's dead as well now. I'm going to be found guilty of this. So, obvious course of action, he puts the bodies of Russell and Carol in the back of his trailer, cleans up the scene, including cleaning up the blood of where she had been shot, and set fire to the entire campsite. So all of Carol
No way they'll think I
Russell's
did
stuff. And then he drove off to find somewhere to dump the bodies. Having found the perfect place down the Union Spur track, and leaving the bodies there, he went home and he covered them in a little bit of, twigs and
Bracken.
stuff. Bracken, yeah. Bracken fern, as my mother used to say.
Bracken fern.
Bracken fern. Yes, those. Now, remember I said this was on the 20th of March. So at precisely that time, Victoria was going into lockdown as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. So Greg gets home and his wife Melanie, who's been watching the news like all of us and thinking, oh my God, Italy's locked down.
His wife Melanie, did you say?
His wife Melanie, yeah. He's married. Greg's married. You're okay.
I was thinking about poor Robin.
No, Robin's at home. No, none of this. No, not a real problem yet. So Greg gets home and his wife Melanie's been preoccupied with how to survive the pandemic, which at that time was occupying everyone's mind. She didn't ask him anything about his camping trip because he did them all the time, and there was this huge thing happening and the shops were being emptied and she couldn't get any dummy roll, and she was doing her COVID survival plan and putting it on the
just
fridge.
didn't give a shit. Neither would I.
Yeah,
I don't
yeah.
care. You do you, I'll do me, whatever.
Yeah. So Greg just didn't mention that he had this hilarious story to tell her about the little kerfuffle that had taken place on his trip, which ended with 2 people dead and their camp burned out. Just fast matched it. So 2 days later, Andrew Murquhart was at the Bucks campsite. Then he came across the scene. We saw that there was a white...
this is a scene.
This is a scene. We saw that there was a white Land Cruiser, single cab ute, and what looked to be a burnt-out camp, he said. Now, I reckon he must have sat pretty badly with him because he went back the next day for another look-see.
Hang on. Can I just ask a question? So is that Russell's vehicle?
Yes.
It's not burnt out, but the campsite was. Do I understand that correctly?
Yeah, so the campsite's right next to the car.
Yep.
And that's all burnt out, and there's tent poles and rubble, like real severely burnt out.
Yeah.
The Land Rover has some scorching on it.
I was going to say, I was surprised it didn't go up.
And its battery is burned.
Right.
But the Land Rover itself didn't go up.
Wow. That's
I
surprising.
mean, possibly not without, I'm guessing that Greg
it was supposed
wanted it to go up, but it didn't. He noted that there was evidence of a burnt tent. The car battery, as I said, was destroyed and the side of the Landy was charred. So he saw burnt tent poles charring on the side of it. That's the metal canopy, and I just said the same thing, sorry. He also noted that there was an esky, and when he opened it up, it had food in it. And they thought that's pretty suspicious.
Well, that's unusual.
Yes.
What sort of food was it?
There were
Bunny
cans.
Eyeballs and fingernails.
I think there was like Pepsis and like cans and stuff, but I think there was milk and there were perishables in there as well.
Oh.
And I mean, the whole thing was suspicious. Normally, you might find a campfire with burned cans or bottles after fishermen or hunters have been there. Not the car and everything else burned to rubble.
He had a look in the landy, noting that the damage to the passenger side wing mirror, and then saw a handbag inside. He took some photos of all of this, and went back home to Melbourne. Now, around the same time, a mate of Russell's, who he used to radio with every day, was a bit surprised when he didn't hear from him.
Breaker.
Breaker. 10-4, Robinucci, we've got ourselves a convoy. So he called Robin, who then said, you know, this isn't right. He hasn't been in contact. She probably tried to phone him and she couldn't get through. And then she reported him missing on the 26th of March. And I assume Carol's family also noticed that she was absent and contacted
They
the
probably
police.
knew that she was with Russell though, right?
Yeah, they might have, whereas Robin didn't.
No.
So when Robin reported him missing, it probably didn't include Carol.
No.
But it wouldn't have taken too much for it all to get put together. Yeah, that they were together. So the police start looking around, and on the 28th of March, they turned up at the campsite after a tip-off from the public, which I'm going to assume was Andrew Mercar. They noted the police, when they get to the campsite, they note all the bird bits as well, and the bits and pieces, as well as ID and wallets in the car. So the two victims, their IDs were sitting in the footwell of the car. So pretty quickly they're like, well, we're at the right place.
Mm-hmm.
Whether you believe that there's a serial killer in the Highlands or that people do wander off and die of exposure and are never found, either way, people do disappear in this area on occasion, and the police have had reports of weirdos in the valley. So, at any rate, the police know that they're going to get lots of weird-ass reports, right? And so they're, instead of relying on all these weird-ass things that they get people ringing them in and tipsters, they do things like check phones, and they check bank accounts, and they check cameras in the area and all that sort of stuff to determine the last known whereabouts of a missing person. Because at this point in the story, they're missing.
That's
They're
exactly
not
right.
They're not known to be dead. We know they're dead, but they're missing. So they look at the phone data from Russell's phone, and they can see that it went offline as they went into Wanagala Valley. And anyone who's sat on this houseboat can
That would happen.
attest to the fact that we have no signal here. Like, you'd be lucky to have one bar, and even then you can't get anything, which is why you have to pay for Elon Musk, because there's literally no service. So it's not unusual whatsoever to go into any one of these mountainous areas.
It's part of the beauty of going to those places.
Yeah.
But in space, nobody can hear you scream.
But it's dangerous too, yeah. So his phone's gone offline as they went into the Wanagala Rally on the 19th. And then it reconnected on the 21st to a network from a different section of the ranges at Hotham Heights. So they know that the phone's been off, and now he's pinging again at another tower somewhere else 3 days later. So you wouldn't think there was much in terms of camera footage, but it turns out Mount Hotham are not happy with people not paying entry fees, and they have cameras to catch them out. So the police looked at cars caught on these cameras at the time of the phone ping, so the same place and the same time. So what car was passing at the time and place that phone pinged, and lo and behold, they saw a dark blue, or at least dark-coloured Nissan Patrol with a connected trailer driving through. And the award for the really dumb criminal goes to Greg Lynn.
Why?
So back in Caroline, because he took the phone. I mean, why would you take the phone?
That's exactly right.
It's so stupid.
I just think that point hadn't been made, that he...
Don't take something that can
Phone
identify
was in
you.
his car
Yeah.
for no good reason.
No, you should have just left
Leave it there, you
handy.
dumbass.
Yeah. So back in Caroline Springs, where Greg lives with Melanie and his son, Greg goes about his normal life, popping out for camping trips, including returning to Union Spur to check on the bodies in May. In fact, it was the day after the first lockdown in Victoria ended and we were released. I assume he was, when he says he's checking the bodies, he was checking that they've not been disturbed or found, but I really hate this expression, I'm just going to go and check on the bodies. It just grosses me out.
Understandably.
Do you think he thought that COVID was a blessing or a hindrance to him being able to get out there and check, or was he relieved that no one would probably be out there wandering around?
That's what happened at both. It was like,
Yeah.
oh, look, just on the off chance someone was out there, I'm better know actually they haven't been touched.
Yeah.
But there would have been a bit of, well, there's no one around, so we should be right. But you got to remember, Metro Melbourne was locked down, but regional wasn't always at the same time.
Oh, okay.
So there would have been a threat that
Wasn't aware,
regional
yeah.
Victorians
In 2020, Rachel wasn't. We were all doing what we...
the regional.
And-
Yeah. So it was really just a metro lockdown.
Yeah.
Mm. Okay, so the other thing that he did around this time was he decided to paint his blue Nissan Patrol beige. and he used a Dulux metal paint.
I see a
and a
petrol
roller.
and I want to paint it beige.
I don't know. Do you use a roller to paint your car normally?
Normally,
What else would
I would
you
have
use?
thought so.
Spray
Oh,
it.
pressure packs.
Spray it.
Paintbrush. You'd put it in a spray booth, for God's sakes, is
I
the
don't
real
think I'd
answer.
try and paint a car.
But I think if I was going to use a roller, you'd get the window and you'd miss all these things.
That's quite hard, see, because he did one of those dumb shit things.
Really, did he?
Yeah. He painted
Oh,
the
God.
bonnet black, but the rest of it brown. Like, not brown, it's beige. But according to Melanie, it was really not unusual for Greg to do this because he painted his car quite often.
How many other people has he killed?
Yeah, I was going to say.
My
yeah,
next
I'm
line was, I wonder why.
That's the question. Exactly.
That's a good question. Oh, so he was also off work at the time as the pandemic had grounded all planes. Well, not the pandemic, but the results of the pandemic. And Greg was a commercial airline pilot. The press made a lot about his job, but really it's irrelevant. His hobbies were much more relevant in the context of this story. So in July, the police pay a visit to Greg. And given they had already identified him within almost no time of the disappearance of Russell and Carol, it seems quite late in the timeline, but I suspect it's just all about evidence gathering.
Yeah.
So they ask him for some info as they're looking for witnesses who may have been in the area when Russell and Carol went missing. By playing the good cop routine, Greg happily told him he'd been in the valley at the time. When they left the house in Caroline Springs, they noticed the Nissan parked in the street and its lovely new paint job. But more importantly, they saw the number plate was a match for the car caught on CCTV by Mount Hotham Pay Your Entry Fees or Else management. So what do you do in this situation? Do you sit tight at home in lockdown, hoping you've done enough to get rid of evidence and that no one will find the bodies? Maybe because you're in lockdown, you become increasingly paranoid and anxious that any knock on the door is the police coming for you.
Or do you
Yes.
or do you fess up and tell your version of events?
Yeah, no, or do you take action, get in your car, drive back to where you dumped the bodies? Yes, yes,
Genius!
yes,
As an innocent person, of course, that's what you do.
absolutely.
Lead them there.
No, he didn't leave them there. 7 months after the deaths, Greg went back to where he'd left Russell and Carol, covered by dragon fern. They were pretty badly decomposed, but he finished the job by pouring kerosene over them and setting fire to their remains till there was nothing much left.
I mean, what an asshole.
It's not great, is it? He said it took around 4 hours. He then used a dustpan and broom.
It took 4 hours.
Well, it's like his homemade crematorium.
I hope you had some stubbies.
I bet it did. Must have stank. Anyway, then he used a dustpan and broom to sweep up the remaining bones, and he hid them all in a tree trunk. They were little fragments at this point. Around 2,100 fragments would be recovered from the spot later.
Oh.
After that, he got even more paranoid, constantly on edge waiting for the police to pounce, saying it was like being in the Truman Show, like I guess.
Except no one was watching.
Well, actually, as it turns out, it wasn't his imagination.
Well, no, but what I mean by that is that so this
The public
story,
aren't
when
watching.
we've spoken about other stories that play out in the media, this one didn't. They were very consistent with the fact that there's a couple who've gone camping who are missing, and that was pretty much all you heard.
I mean, there's a lot of speculation, but
not in the media. And so
true,
it wasn't like the media were saying they've found a bloke, they're watching a bloke, blah, blah, blah.
No,
So from his perspective, it wasn't like the Truman Show where everyone's watching what's going on, it's playing out on the TV. It's literally being done in a very covert way that has no... Is this your story? You're about to say that?
Yes.
Well, best you say it then.
My point was, he was saying it was like being in the Truman Show, and I guess what he meant by that was that, his life he was being watched, but he just sounded paranoid. But as it turns out, it wasn't his imagination, because the police, to your point, they're very convinced that they've got their man. They just need more evidence, right?
They need him to muck up.
Well, and so they spend 16 months watching and waiting. They tap his car, his home, his driveway. They put secret cameras up everywhere.
Wow.
It's all very interesting, none of which was used as evidence in the trial, which does make you wonder if they did this in the most kosher fashion possible. But in another May 4 TV move, the police set up a story to trap him in November 2021. Working with 60 Minutes, they provided a detail for the program that they had kept secret. the traffic photo of the Nissan Patrol. So up until then, that had not been ever released to public.
Yeah.
There for everyone to see was the car and trailer. Now, he'd actually sold the trailer by then. So he sold the trailer, I think, in April. So,
Yeah,
like, within
not long after he got
weeks
back,
of
yeah.
getting back, yeah.
Yep.
So he gets through the trailer and then he paints his car, right? And the car at this point is blue, it's got the trailer, and it's got the camping awning on the side. The secret tapes heard his wife saying, "That looks like your car!" Which it really did, because
It was.
it was.
Oh, no.
Yeah. But Melanie, they had no clue. She just thought it looked like his car. She at no point really thought he was a murderer. So what does Greg do?
Although he goes camping and does stuff like that, never crossed her mind.
Didn't appear to, no. But she was very focused, remember, on how much toilet paper there was available. He takes the awning off his car, of course. That's the only thing he can do. But unfortunately for him, it was after they'd planted the cameras. So it's all caught on tape. And as far as the police are concerned, he's incriminating himself trying to hide his involvement. So on the 22nd of November 2021, Greg Lynn is arrested. It would seem the police had noticed his increased paranoia in the secret taking. He was heard saying how his wife would be left to care for 3 children and that a snake bite would be a good way to go. So when they arrested him, he'd gone off on a solo camping trip and they actually thought that he might be going to kill himself. So they arrested him before he could do that.
Mhm.
I don't know if he was or not, but they were conservative.
Yeah, forced their hand a bit.
Yeah. He was taken to the Sale police station and initially, following the advice of his lawyer, gave a no-comment interview. However, he wasn't released for 3 days, and this interview approach was commented on by the judge later as being pretty oppressive, and the police badgered him with thousands of questions, and they kept undermining the advice of his lawyer. The female lawyer had said, just no comment, just no comment. And instead of really listening to that, the police said, you're in control of your own destiny. Why are you listening to this woman? And they likened her to being like a airline stewardess. And so, him being a pilot,
Yeah.
he's got this hierarchical view. So it worked, unbelievably. And he spilled the beans. He says, all right, I'm going to ignore my solicitor's advice and tell you what happened right from the start.
Oh.
Quote, unquote. He then told them the version of events that I went through earlier, which is, this fantastical fight scene and Russell accidentally killing his wife or girlfriend and accidentally killing himself. And then he says, I haven't behaved well. I've made some poor decisions. But murder, as I understand it, I am innocent of. He drew a map of where the remains of Russell and Carol were, and they were able to recover what was left, which was mostly bone fragments, teeth, and a ring and a burned watch. So on the 25th of January 2003, after an 8-day committal hearing, Greg pleaded not guilty on 2 counts of murder. And then we go into the trial, and the trial itself is quite weird and interesting. So the jury is selected in the Supreme Court for the trial on the 9th of May, but for technical reasons, which the judge did not explain, apart from a sort of condescending statement that the law is full of technical things that I just can't be asked explaining them to you, which of course was said in a more eloquent fashion, the jury was discharged the next day. And I have no idea why. So they impaneled a jury, then they discharged that jury a day later. No explanation is given then nor now. A new jury is impaneled on the 13th of May, and I think it's
Weird that no description or no reason.
And even saying, it was weird even just saying, the law is full of technical things. So for reasons I can't, it didn't say I can't be bothered explaining, but it kind of, implied it. I'm not going to tell you why. It's just take my word for it. Thank you. Goodbye.
Yeah. Off your fuck.
Oh, fuck, yeah. New jury is impaneled on the 13th and the trial is off and running. There were 48 witnesses for the prosecution and 1 witness for the defence, Greg himself. Now, Greg gave evidence, and look, I could go into this is how I know about the penis, and then there's the thing about...
I mean, you probably should go into
You
how
could.
It's in the trial, all right? So this is how it all came out in the trial. The full Rob, that's how we
It
know.
sounds
it's
very
Victorian.
relevant. The penis
It
sounds...
was. I don't know why it came up in trial, but Robin was telling the story, and
I don't know why it came up in trial and didn't go down for the entire show.
Robin was also talking, I think it was in the context of his relationship with Carol or something, and the police had found his prescription Viagra packet at her house. So I don't think it was ever questioned that they were having an affair or anything.
I remember it coming out that they had an affair. So
It was very, what's the word I'm looking for? Scurrilous at the time, but it's not really that.
No, but I think initially it just was two people who'd gone camping and gone missing.
And then it turned out to be lovers.
That they were, or that he was married to someone else. And then
No.
that all sort of came out slowly.
Yeah.
I don't recall that being a quick process. I think it came out.
Yeah.
I think their age played a role in that, because I think people find it a little bit more challenging to get their head around sort of sexually active older people as opposed to, young people who are putting everything on the line when they're, hooking up. Whereas this is like a long-term thing with an aged wife. Do you know what I mean?
A friend of mine refers to it as
older people.
elder love.
Geriatric.
I think the other thing, though, and this is what makes this case very different. It was very public.
Yeah.
But they steered away from scandal and anything that wasn't relevant to the case. So who cares? In the context of trying to find the two people who were missing and possibly try to catch a murderer once, because pretty quickly they would have gone, finding the Land Cruiser, Land Rover, they would have been going, it's a murder case.
Almost immediately.
But
at
that
point.
didn't come out quickly, and they avoided any kind of scandal. It was just like, let's stick to the facts that are relevant. If this is a murder case, let's not get carried away with all of that stuff. Let's stick to the facts in the media, is what I mean. So
I know. The media were
very
much on, these people are missing. There was a lot of searching. At some point they work out that they're dead. They're still looking for them. They're looking for their remains. So they do a lot of searching around it, even though they know that they're not alive, or they assume they're not alive. There's lots of forensic collection at the sites and all the rest of it.
I mean, imagine if Nancy Grace was in Victoria, she would have been mouthing off about all the scandals and all the reasons why, blah, blah, blah. Remember Nancy Grace she's the
that's what she does for a living.
Ex-lawyer, TV, media personality.
She does for
comments on all of
big
the
cases, and stuff, So Greg gave evidence himself on the 6th of June. Like his interview before minutes, he was calm, measured, and well-spoken. He maintained he was innocent of murder, but said that his actions were despicable. It's pretty unusual to put a defendant on the stand in Australia in that sort of circumstance, so that was the first weird thing that happened. At the beginning, second, because the first one is the jury just exited and replaced. Now, at the beginning of the trial, the jury were informed that they were able to decide between murder and manslaughter charges, so they were both on the table. However, in June, the prosecution, defence and judge discussed that manslaughter could no longer be a possible outcome. To most people, this was the third really odd thing. The reason for this is the direction of both the prosecution and the defence arguments effectively precluded the option of manslaughter. The prosecution's argument was Greg intentionally murdered both Russell and Carol, so if the jury had any doubt that it was murder, they have to acquit, because the prosecution made no room whatsoever for accidental death. They said he'd killed Russell and then executed Carol as she was a witness.
So they ignored his testimony of what happened.
Oh, entirely. They said, that's a load of old bullshit.
Yeah.
You murdered them and you intended to murder them.
Yeah.
So if he killed them by accident or unintentionally, it's manslaughter. They made no room for manslaughter. Yeah. It's murder.
And I think we've discussed this before. If the police go in with murder, it can't then get downgraded. So they choose murder. They can't then say...
In the case of this, they both were on the table, though. That's what's weird about it.
Yeah.
The judge instructed the jury at the beginning that you are able to choose your verdicts as either murder or manslaughter.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why... But then the two arguments veered so far away that they basically took manslaughter off the table themselves. Yeah. So the prosecution was saying that they'd be done on purpose, of course, with no living witness beyond the accused and little to no forensic evidence. This all hinged on the prosecution leaning into the importance of Greg destroying the crime scene, moving the bodies and subsequently burning and eradicating their remains later. This was a quite disproportionate response, which points to his intention to murder and cover up. Similarly, the defence case was all about how he'd not killed anyone. Russell had just had a really bad day at the office and somehow killed his lover and then fell on a knife and accidentally killed himself.
Russell as the aggressor.
Yes. Greg was somehow kind of innocent bystanders from all of this.
Oh, what, we went to kill deer.
And he had nothing to do with it. So if this were true, your options were, did he murder or not? Again, as there's no suggestion from the defendant that he may have accidentally caused the deaths, manslaughter is off the table.
Yep.
But it is
Self-defense or
weird.
murder.
Well, he's saying it's an accident. I didn't kill anyone. Not
Oh,
even
you're
self-
sorry. Yeah, no, you're right.
I didn't do it.
You're right.
I
He
didn't
killed
kill anyone. And the prosecution's saying you killed both of them.
Correct. Yeah.
So it's just murder. The jury had to decide beyond reasonable doubt that Greg Lynn murdered the campers. And the definition of murder, the legal definition, is key here. Murder, as defined by Section 18(1)(a) of the Crimes Act 1900, is made out where a voluntary act or omission of the accused causes the death of the deceased and the act is committed with an intent to inflict grievous bodily harm or an intent to kill or reckless indifference to human life or committed by the accused or some accomplice with him or her in an attempt to commit or during or immediately after the commission of an offence punishable by at least 25 years imprisonment, which is
fairly
constructive.
precise, isn't it? There's a lot. There's a lot in that definition, but
I think the first 3 points are the more salient
Or-
points. So the jury have to be sure entirely that Greg Lynn intended to kill or had reckless indifference to human life.
beyond reasonable doubt, not entirely. So
Beyond reasonable doubt.
that
yes.
could have some doubt, but it has to be reasonable.
Beyond reasonable doubt. So, and if they couldn't be sure, then he would be acquitted. So here comes the final weirdness, and as juror discussions are never released to the public, we'll never really understand how this was decided. However, after 2 months of the trial, the jury, and I think they deliberated for about a week, found Greg Lynn guilty of murdering Carol Clay, but not of murdering Russell Hill.
Yeah.
And I must admit, it's the weirdest verdict. It's very unusual to have a split verdict, but to have one where there can be no reasonable doubt, but enough doubt to not convict on the second charge, and no evidence save conjecture and a dubious witness testimony, I really don't see how this stood up.
The other thing that was really significant for me was that it was a hybridization of the prosecution's case and the defence's case. So there were two very differing cases presented, and the jury came back with,
Something halfway
"We believe a little bit of this happened," and they just made their own entire version of events, which was shocking.
And I think the other thing that was interesting was that even though the prosecution lent into the whole thing about him tampering with evidence, you know, all that sort of stuff, they didn't cross-examine him on it. He mentioned it in the final closing statements, but effectively you can't use that evidentiary as a jury unless the person has had the opportunity to be examined on it. So there's sort of failings in the way the prosecution ran out too. Not unsurprisingly, he's appealing the murder charge about Carol Clay, and you know, I'm not really sure whether or not he'll actually you won't beat it. I do wonder how he'll go a second time. He hasn't been sentenced yet, but is looking at about 25 years, which is the standard for murder in Victoria. Now, I've left this last tidbit out to the very end because don't know if it's relevant or not, but I just will add it to the mix.
Is it about a penis that won't go down?
It's not about penis, no. Greg Lynn had a wife before Melanie, so he had a first wife.
Mm-hmm.
And she died in 1999, and it was ruled a suicide. But according to witnesses, her parents, the neighbour and various friends, he'd been an abusive and controlling husband who at one point had decapitated the family pet pig when it tore up the garden with an axe, and as in decapitated the pig with an axe, not the pig tore up the garden with an axe.
Yes.
And
Thanks for clarifying.
well, just in case.
I was totally going with the pig. Taking an axe to the garden.
You know. Yeah. And he may have had something to do with the death of the neighbour's dog, who was found killed and hanging from the neighbour's fence because the dog had been giving him the shits. People close to Lisa, who had divorced him prior to her death, would never have said that she would never have taken her own life. And there's talk of calling for an investigation to determine if it could have been murder or an assisted suicide. And that, my friends, is the camper killer, or just one camper, Greg Lynn.
Yes, that
Very
is exactly
interesting.
the story of. It's fascinating.
Because for me, from this side of the country, you're quite right. It felt like it was, they're missing. There's an old couple. Oh, he was married. Oh, I think they're having an affair. I think they've been together for a long time. They're missing.
Yeah.
They're missing. Oh, there's a pilot. You know, that came
Yeah,
months and months later.
Right,
As a
right.
pilot.
Whatever
What?
that had to
How'd
do
you know
with
that all of a
anything.
sudden?
what's
Yeah,
with
as a
the
pilot.
Jetstar guy?
As a pilot. And then I haven't heard that last bit. I've missed the.
Yeah, well, the trial only went ahead May, June this year.
Oh, right.
I was shocked at the guilty of one and not
Split
the other.
verdicts, yeah.
And as I understand it, was because she was shot in the head.
Mm.
And I think they were saying the likelihood of her being shot in the head as an accident, where she's, shot through the mirror, so effectively she's cowering behind the car,
Yeah.
she's been shot in the head. The likelihood of that being an accident is
Minimal.
so unreasonable that they would have gone, we have to find him guilty of that. The murder of Russell or the death of Russell is much harder to
You can have evidence. That's not evidence.
and therefore it's probably reasonable in the jury's mind. I'm assuming this is what they're kind of how they've come up with it. It's reasonable to assume that Russell may have been stabbed by himself in a scuffle, or he may have been stabbed by.
It might be a
Greg.
shot.
So there's no proof,
The
right? There's
point
nothing,
is,
no
he
evidence. Is that
also
right,
may
Schmitty?
have been shot. There's no evidence.
The only evidence, the only forensic evidence that they were able to find were skull fragments of Carol Clay, and the expert witness who testified at the trial from a forensic perspective talked about how they had traces of something or other which suggested that they could have come into contact with metal. She said, it's not my field of expertise, so I'm not going to say definitively that this is to do with the bullet fragments or anything like that, but it's possible. So anyway, the point is, I guess, there is a tiny amount of forensic evidence that she absolutely got shot in the head, whereas there's nothing about how
There's
Russell
no evidence
died.
about how Russell died.
Yeah.
So the police, when they knew that it was him, they didn't know what he had done because there was no evidence. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yeah, because they didn't know where the bodies were.
Right.
So they knew the campsite was burned out. The bodies weren't there
Okay.
because he moved the
Yes.
bodies.
Then
and
he
then he burnt
burnt the bodies, yeah.
So they didn't find out, as I understand it, they didn't find out where the bodies were until he told them.
That's
Yeah,
right.
okay.
Yeah.
So they'd already arrested him at that point.
Correct.
He had his 3 days of interview, and then he eventually said,
Okay,
this
yeah.
is what happened. And he drew a little map for them.
Yeah.
So they could work out where to find the remains. By then, though, he would have been moderately comfortable because he'd burnt them and there's really nothing much to find.
Yeah.
Yeah, so sentencing, thoughts? I mean, he hasn't technically been sentenced yet. So we go first.
Do you think he did it, Swanee? Or do you think his story is...
I think he did it, but I don't quite understand how it played out, of course, because we only have his version of event. It doesn't seem...
Pretty haphazard, I feel.
I find that difficult to buy. I don't trust him to tell the truth. I don't think that's in his nature and or...
He has said he hasn't told a single lie ever over any of this.
I think based on
He's gone on the record.
last week's story of how quickly things escalate,
Yes.
probably there was a big escalation
Yeah.
in the campsite that meant that he needed to get his gun. Annie, get your gun.
But Russell didn't have any
Weaponry.
or history of hurting or upsetting people or,
No.
other than his ex or his wife.
No, I mean, there's like an unnecessarily, like I left a bunch of dumb shit out because I just don't see how it's relevant. But like one guy saw Russell driving up the track and said he went really fast and he was a bit grumpy. And like, again, irrelevant. So it's not like, well, that sets the scene for Russell to be an asshole who deserves to get shot or
No.
stabbed.
But this afternoon we were having a quick chat about this in the ladies' lounge on the top of the house.
Yeah.
And we discussed how Russell had threatened to go to the police about Greg's hunting of deer
Too close
too
to
close to the campsite, and he had drone footage of it. And I could see how that conversation on the back of last week's story could escalate into
give me £3,000. I'll
Fist-
run you off the road and set
smash
smash your car.
the threat of being told that you're going to go to the police with blah blah blah. It leads to a conversation that continually escalates, and there was a point where Schmitty, you said, I think that Greg was saying that Carol was saying, Russell, stop.
That was when they were wrestling the gun.
But so and that was when Greg says they were wrestling with him. No.
Yeah.
But it could have just been that she was saying that because it was getting more and more heated, and she's going,
said it at all.
or maybe she did though,
Yeah.
and maybe she's going, just stop it. Like, let's get out of here.
Cut it
This
out.
is crazy.
Grow up, you pair.
Yeah.
Cut it out, you two.
Who cares if you're right or wrong?
Yeah.
Let's just go.
Yeah.
But old mate's gone, I'll fix this.
I reckon they had an altercation in the first instance over the drone or whatever. He goes back to his camp. He stews on it. He gets more and more angry, possibly more and more pissed. He gets his gun and he either goes over and just shoots them, or he goes over to threaten and be scary, and then
Was
it
the phone
escalates.
ever found?
No, drone and phones never found.
So possibly too, Russell has filmed some of it on his phone.
No idea.
If
Wasn't
old mate's going crazy and he's gone, all right, now I've got more footage, you're fucked.
maybe.
Actually,
No
You're
idea. I
fucked,
mean,
I've got a gun in my car.
all I can say is that he said that he destroyed. I think I read that he has said that he destroyed the phones and drone.
But the driver to destroy the phone could be that there's
There was something on it.
footage on it.
Well, I suppose it's a bit like the jurors.
Yeah.
Is it beyond reasonable doubt, or do we think he did it?
I don't know.
It's not impossible. But it's very unlikely. His version of events is
And
how
that
it
was the
went
other
down.
thing we were talking about in the ladies' lounge. There's doubt and there's reasonable doubt.
Yeah.
And his story, given his actions post
Yes.
the whole thing, and the fact that he was the only one who could provide any witness testimony, if that's what you want to call it, who could provide a version of events,
Yeah.
just stinks. You know, that his version of events, and then what he did after that, to me, is super doubtful that all of this has happened, and then he's gone and burnt the campsite, moved the bodies, then gone back and burnt the bodies, and changed the color of his car, and blah blah blah. It's possible, but it's, to me, unlikely. So
I think he killed them. I don't think that he necessarily went out to hunt them and kill them. Like,
oh no,
something happened and escalated. He killed them.
could have been a heat of the moment thing.
Yeah, and he's gone. I'm covering it all up. And his version of it was Russell did everything. It's just nonsensical.
It sounds to me like she was assassinated, and I would therefore go, he probably was too.
I mean, the prosecution's view is that actually he killed Russell first, and she witnessed it, so he might have hunted
While she was
her.
cowering.
She was cowering down, and he's come around, so it's quite possible. So I can see where they get that from. At the end of the day, the only person who really knows what happens in
Wanangata?
is Greg Lynn himself. So we may never know what really happened, or he's told us what really happened, and we just choose to not believe it because it's so
Maybe
hard to believe.
this is one where he's going to get divine retribution, and we just haven't seen it yet. So you know how he's got his appeal, he's got his sentencing, blah blah blah. Maybe he'll die of cancer in 12 months.
Oh, goodness. Or he'll get acquitted because he didn't kill anyone. Unlikely, but possible.
I'm hoping. Oh well, I say I'm hoping not. Because I'm assuming that he did it. And
That's right.
Again, we've seen the media stories, which in this case have been very controlled, and there hasn't been a lot of release. We haven't seen a lot about the trial and the detail of why the jury were so conflicted. So there's a lot that they were reading into it. But I think it's one of those ones where you kind of add up all of the cumulative evidence and go, probably he did. But let's wait and see.
Yeah, so I think it is a bit of a wait and see. What do you think, Shay? Sorry, Swanee?
I think you have to wait and see. So she's saying is that it hasn't really come to total fruition yet. But
not from an appeal.
No,
et
I
cetera.
kind of
He's
think.
been-
I really don't know, but no one really knows, of course. That's a dumb thing for me to say. But, we're sort of being asked to believe the versions of someone who then, as Clarkey said, went to such great lengths to then dispose of the bodies. None of it was in his best interest if he could have proven that it was in self-defense or that something had happened. So it leads me to believe that someone who's gone to that much effort had definitely done the wrong thing. So,
that's pretty much the
that's how
prosecution's
I feel about
case.
it. Yeah.
All right. Well, I think we'll leave that one there. We'll see what plays out for the
interesting.
coming
Thank
months.
you for
Will we
covering it,
ever?
though, because it certainly put a lot more colour onto something that I was obviously aware of, but I've always wondered why I knew so little, with the exception of older an
Missing.
affair.
Elder love.
Yeah,
Gone
elder
bad.
Elder
love.
love gone bad.
Yes.
Jet
Yeah.
Star
Like,
pilot.
okay, well, and then, yes, the Jetstar
And then
pilot, and then
Jetstar.
sort of
No,
quiet from
thing,
there.
yeah.
So I never
Weird.
understood
Yeah.
how that all, why it was so few details. Now I think I understand why.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well
All
done.
right.
Interesting.
Well, thank you. And on that note, as we say every week, miss you already.
Au revoir, my darling.
Ciao, ciao.
Ciao.
Thanks for listening to Trial by Wine. You can contact us at trialbywine@gmail.com. Please rate, review and subscribe to Trial by Wine on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts. If you'd like to support us, you can become a patron at www.patreon.com, Trial by Wine, or visit our website www.trialbywine.com to donate to us. Your support will help us cover many more cases and apply wacky sentences. We really appreciate you listening and hope you tell everyone about us. Our cover art is by John Christo and music is by Beauchamp from pixabay.com.